Good morning. So I'm really thrilled this morning to be joined by Sarah Ellis. Sarah, thank you so much for giving up your time and coming on to chat with me this morning.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to our conversation together.
Excellent. Having recently published a book, I have the utmost respect for everything that you and Helen have done. You've been beyond successful with Squiggly Career, but for anyone who potentially may not be familiar with your work, so you're the co-founder of Amazing If, and it's an award-winning company, and you've basically been working with Helen on this mission to make squiggly careers better for everyone. I think it's an absolutely great idea. You both do so much. So you host the Squiggly Career podcast. You're the author of Squiggly Career, a number one Sunday Times best-selling book. Also, you coach you. I know that you've got a new book coming out in February that we'll talk about as well, but an incredible background and career before taking this change and transition yourselves. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about your journey. If it's all right with you, we'll just dive straight into the questions.
Of course.
So, would you mind just giving a bit of an insight to your career journey to date, and any standout moments for you along the way?
So, I spent the majority of my career working in marketing. I was always drawn to marketing roles. I liked to be creative, to have ideas. It just looked fun when I was first getting started. I remember when I first started working at Boots, I was doing placements and I was in a role where you got to, choose the packaging for products. And I just remember being really interested in like the design and how that all worked. And then I worked on some children's clothing and how that was all going to be set up in store. And I think I just liked that kind of the ability to create, also to be able to kind of see my work in action. And I did lots of different marketing roles. I think the things that I suppose were consistent, certainly for the first 20 years of my squiggly career, is I worked in very large organisations, all of which I really enjoyed. I liked big companies. I liked working at scale. I enjoyed that structure, and all the different opportunities that I think big companies can offer to be able to squiggle and stay, to sort of transfer your talents. So, though I worked broadly in marketing, that looked like lots of different jobs. I worked in innovation, I worked in content, before even anyone really knew what content was. I've got very clear memories of sitting in a board meeting when I worked at Sainsbury's and no one really understanding what content was. When YouTube was very new, which
Yeah.
definitely shows my age. So I worked in these big companies, mainly in like I say, these marketing kind of creative jobs. And I think a few standout moments, I often think your memorable moments in your squiggly career are the ones where you were surprised, maybe you were proud, or something didn't turn out in the way that you expected. And I do remember at one point where everything in my career felt like it was going really well. So I'd got a job that I loved. I was working in Sainsbury's, which I really enjoyed. Like I loved food. I really liked the culture there. Um, and then my whole team got kind of restructured, and my role disappeared. And I actually remember it's a really good lesson in you can be doing the best job you can possibly be doing. So knew I was performing well in that job. Externally, I was being recognised for my impact, like in the
Yeah.
industry. So on paper, you were everything was just like completely going well, and I was progressing, and I felt really confident, in kind of where I was and where I wanted to go. And then you do feel like you have kind of the rug pulled out from underneath you. And it was a really good reminder that will happen. It had happened to me before, actually, but I think I was more surprised that time. But it will happen to all of us. It will happen more than once. And
Yes.
it is never really about you. Usually it's just about, teams and organizations needing to set up in the right way. And actually, I often did jobs that were probably slightly more susceptible to being restructured than some others.
Yes.
I never did the classic core jobs. I always did like jobs that no one had ever done before, jobs leading new projects. So there was always slightly more jeopardy in the jobs that I really enjoyed. Um, but it was a kind of good reminder of how important it is, I think, in our careers to create, not wait. To kind of always have this like create mindset, and to make sure that your development isn't dependent on a manager, or your organization, or that you ever get sort of too comfortable. You always want to take ownership. And I think in that moment, I'd got a bit too comfortable, and I just had stopped doing maybe some of the scanning or the curious career conversations, all of those
Yeah.
things that kind of build up your career currency. And then I remember feeling really like quite exposed and really worried. And ultimately, it did end up being okay. And I stayed at Sainsbury's and managed to transfer my talents from marketing to corporate affairs, which was a really good move for me to make. I'm really glad I made that move. But there was definitely a kind of this moment of sort of shock and surprise. So there's lots of things I'm really proud of in my squiggly career, but I sometimes think it's good to think about a moment where, like, I honestly think I got that wrong. I don't think anyone else. I think that's anyone else's fault. I think I had just, or yeah, everybody gets a bit guilty of occasionally being a bit lazy or a bit too comfortable. And I think I was in that moment, like I really remember that. And so I think hopefully for people listening or watching, that would be my sort of suggestion to everybody: is always be investing in your own development. Don't sort of put yourself last too often, because it can leave you. It's quite a risky decision to make.
It is, and you make a really valid point that it happens. Yeah, I don't know the specific stats, but in my experience, it happens to everyone at least once in their career.
Yeah, I think
Possibly.
it was 2.3, but I think it's gone up to
Ah,
3. So restructures and redundancy. So obviously sometimes it's restructure and it doesn't result in redundancy. Sometimes it does. But I think if we all anticipate it's going to happen at least 3 times, and as working lives are getting longer, that number's probably only going to increase. And so I think rather than that feeling like it's a one-off, it's like, well, that will happen. It just will. And
and
that's why I
it's
think,
not
it's a good
personal.
reminder. No.
Yeah, and that that's the bit that I see. I think it's accepting that it's out of your control, out of one's control. People do find it hard, even at a senior level, if they've experienced this previously in their career. I find to really remember that it's not personal, it's a corporate that's making a commercial decision. And that can really knock people sometimes in
Yeah.
terms of confidence. It's very emotional. So yeah, but it's a really interesting point that was maybe a bit of a wake up moment, or I guess like a
Yeah.
realization in terms of that, it is out of your control, and no matter how good it all looks on paper, it's ultimately not your decision sometimes. I guess it reinforces also the idea of it's always worth continuing the investment in networking and
Yeah.
relationships and your personal brand, rather than waiting every time until you're kind of ready to put your head up and look for a new role. I think it's good to have that as a continuous process.
Yeah, I would really advocate to everybody always be having curious career conversations. Like, think about who is in your career community. I think if I hadn't had my career community, I don't think I ever would have started Amazing If full time. So I was
Okay.
always very happy in big organisations. So I wasn't ever running away from something I wasn't enjoying. And that was the same for my co-founder, Helen. One of the reasons we found it hard to leave is we were really enjoying the jobs that we were doing, and we felt like we were good at them and having a positive impact. And so it wasn't like we were really like, oh, I really want to go and do something dramatically different. And I remember, so I probably was stalling for a bit, and I was definitely scared as well. I thought, can I run a
Yeah.
company? I don't know. I work for these massive companies that are often very well run, but not by me. Like, will I know how to do this well? I don't know anyone else who does it. All of my friends were in marketing, in senior marketing roles. I didn't know anyone who ran a company. I certainly didn't know anyone who would describe themselves like as an entrepreneur or anything like that. And I still wouldn't describe myself in that way. But the tipping point for me was a conversation actually I had with a lady called Lisa Thomas, who at the time I think was CMO at Virgin. And
Hmm.
she was like, "What are you waiting for?" And she said it to me like we were both getting a cup of tea, I think, before an event. And it was just very direct and very to the point. And it really kind of hit a nerve. And I think she was maybe expecting me to say some very practical reasons, like, well, until I'll be able to pay myself, or I'm not
Yes.
sure it's a viable company or whatever it was. But actually, really, the thing that was stopping me, what was just me, was my
Yep.
own kind of confidence gremlins of like, will I be good enough? Am I smart enough to do this? What if I fail? All of those kind of things. But the thing that reassured me by that point, I was like, do you know what? If I do this for a year and it doesn't work, I can name 5 people who I think would at least have a conversation with me about a job. I don't know that they would definitely give me a job because they might not have one, but at
Yep.
least I can name people who know me well enough who would be sponsors. So they've seen me like do good work, they've sort of seen me at my best, they've seen the difference I can make in roles. And I feel confident enough in our relationship that I could go to them and say, amazing if has failed. I've learned a lot, but it's not worked.
Yeah.
I want to kind of come back into marketing agencies or back into brands. And I think because that was the worst case scenario, I decided that I could live with that. I could live with that happening. I could live with trying it for a year and then coming back into marketing, which I already enjoyed. But I did need someone to sort of say to me quite directly, like what's stopping you, to just really, to sort of create that clarity, that black and white clarity of facts versus feelings, I think it's fair to say.
Good for Lisa. She was the prompt then. Would you share
She
with
was.
us a bit more about Amazing If, and the incredible work that you and Helen do?
So at Amazing If, we just want to make Squiggly Careers better for everyone, and we try to do that in ways where it's free. So if you're going, I just need some career development today and kind of right now. That's why we have over 500 episodes of the podcast that people can search, and we have free 10-minute tools. And we put on learning sprints about every 6 months for 5 days. People can join for 10 minutes a day. We had about 10,000 people sprinting with us on sort of self-awareness skills times AI in September from all over the
Incredible.
world. So
And are those free as well?
yeah. Those are free. So yeah,
Wow.
skill sprints are really popular now, and they don't disappear. So we do them live with everyone, and I think it's great to join in that way because you're learning with lots of people, so you
Yeah.
get that momentum and energy. But they don't disappear. So if for whatever reason you can't do the week, teams sometimes do them together, organisations do them together. We keep them live on our website. So a big part of what we do is just trying to democratise development. And we work with about 150 companies now all over the world, in every industry, in every culture, on kind of learning and career development. So
Mhm.
really trying to move away from ladder-like learning to really
Yeah.
think about kind of this idea of squiggly careers. And our next book is on moving from ladder-like learning to learning like a lobster.
Are you able to give us a bit of an insight to
Yeah.
Learning Like a Lobster, which I know is
Yeah,
being published imminently, beginning of
it
new
is. It
new
is.
year?
Yeah, it's maybe not the most obvious role model for learning, but we think it's a good one. We think they're a
It's
good
a
one.
memorable one.
It is memorable. It is memorable. It does get everybody intrigued. If nothing else, everyone's like, "Oh, tell me more." So lobsters are really interesting. They never stop growing. They grow the most in hard moments when they shed their hard outer shells, and in that moment, they almost look jelly-like. They look really different to the lobsters that we are all familiar with, and they even fuel their own growth. So they keep their old shells, they bury them somewhere close by in the sand, and then they go and eat them because they are packed full of calcium. And so they are essentially a self sustaining, resourceful growth system. And one of the things that we think about learning at work is that still sometimes it looks like going on a course, or it's something that we never have enough time for. And so there's a bit of a knowing doing gap. We know learning is important. If we used to go to work to learn to do a job, like learning is now the job, we need to get really good at learning how to learn, but the practicalities still kind of get in the way. And so
Hmm.
the book is about how you can learn as you go, so you never stop growing like the lobster, how you can learn in hard moments, in your shell shedding moments, redundancies, restructures, difficult managers, difficult cultures, and also how you can lead your own learning. So how you can fuel your own learning so you keep growing, so you don't have to rely on other people or the place that you work. You can really take ownership for yourself. So yeah, that's the new book.
Oh, I love that. What a simple and brilliant concept of this self-sufficient sort of learning ecosystem. I wish you every success with that. Um, I wanted to ask about kind of some of the challenge. One of the things that you and Helen have done brilliantly is, how you've taken control of your career, some of the biggest challenges that you may have overcome. You've explained the situations you have the changes within Sainsbury's, but I know a lot of the people listening will be maybe in a challenging situation at the moment. Do you have any tips or anything you can share in terms of if you're in a challenging situation, how people can overcome that and have the confidence as much as anything else to move forward?
I think one thing that's really important to remember when things are hard is asking for help is a sign of strength, not
Mm,
weakness. And I sometimes feel like we put pressure on ourselves to need to solve everything for ourselves. Now, of course, we want people to take initiative and to take ownership. But when things are hard, when things feel messy and complex, we often do need other people, because other people can give us perspective. They can give us a different kind of data for our development. So every time I think about those knotty hard moments in my squiggly careers, I've always needed some help from, could be my peers who've been through it before if it's not something I've been through, could be from people outside the organization, informal mentors, sponsors. So I think the first thing is like ask for the help that you need, but make sure you are specific about that ask. So I think you are more likely to get better quality support if you can let people know, if you can signal, well, what does that support look like for you?
mhm.
I always remember when Helen and I were having a really hard moment where we got this wrong, because it really reinforced to me the importance of getting it right. And running a company is hard some of the time. And I remember I was in London. I was on a platform. I think I was at Clapham Junction, and it was really cold. It was like snowy ice, but not in a pretty nice way. And it was quite bleak. And I was feeling really sort of just overwhelmed by how much we'd got to get done between that point and Christmas, which actually we're talking at a similar point now. So it was kind of this time of year. And
Deja vu.
yeah, I mean, it is a bit. And I rang her up, and actually, what I needed from her, the help I needed from her, was someone to listen.
Mhm.
I sort of didn't really need her to solve it. I just needed her to sort of listen to me and sort of be there to support. She is naturally a solver. So, what she wanted to do was to give me actions and ideas, um, which was, again, her very positive intent to kind of try and be useful. But that actually created real friction because I found it really frustrating, and actually the conversation felt ended up feeling quite tense. And I was like, well, I already feel tense, and now I kind of felt even worse, which is not how I usually feel after our conversations together. And actually, we quickly reflected that I hadn't been clear about the help that I needed, and she also hadn't asked the question, how can I be most helpful? And I sometimes think in those knotty, difficult moments, we need different things. Sometimes we need support, someone to just listen. Sometimes we need a sounding board. I want to run my ideas past you and get some kind of fast feedback. Sometimes we do need solutions. We feel stuck. We sort of haven't got any ideas. We're sort of all out of ideas. So actually, you do want solutions. So I think knowing what you need, but then also thinking about, well, who is best to help me given what I need? So if I need solutions, there is no one better than Helen. No one. I've never seen anyone who is so good at just being able to like find a way forward, whatever the situation. If I do need support, that kind of listening and that empathy, of course she can do it, and if I ask her to, she definitely can. But she's probably not my first choice. There are other people who I think can do that better. And so I think once we started to like understand that for ourselves, you can just ask for the support that you need. You can signal it much more specifically, but you can also think about it within a team, and you can spot it in different people. It's often quite easy to see like how people are most useful. So that would kind of just be a little top tip from me, is definitely ask for help, but then just be quite specific about signaling like what is it that you need, what's useful for you in that moment, and it will change throughout that knotty moment.
That's great advice, and particularly the bit about really thinking about who you're going to ask for the different types of response that you're looking for or support that you're looking for in return. And I can relate to similar conversations where I maybe haven't asked the right person for the right kind of support
Yeah.
that I've needed at that point in time. That's a really good idea. Something that I guess relates really to the current market at the moment. So, it's been a very challenging job market. There's a lot of senior people who right now might be looking internally at their sort of career to date. They're at a bit of a crossroads, or the last couple of years hasn't gone quite as they'd initially planned. What guidance would you give to a senior leader who feels a bit uncomfortable at the moment? Maybe things aren't looking as though they're going to be as neat as they had expected. Any tips that they could take to reframe it?
Well, I've interviewed some incredible people about their squiggly careers, and not a single one of them has ever had a plan. What they are all really clear on is what motivates and drives them, the direction that they're going in that moment, but they sort of also hold that direction lightly. So, though they might sort of go, well, I'm really committed to doing this for now, but they know the difference between, like, for now doesn't mean forever. And
Mhm.
so I think, firstly, like, giving yourself permission to go, well, maybe I'd got some thoughts in mind about what I was going to do and where I was going to go. And it looks like now that's just not going to be the reality. Maybe those jobs have changed, maybe things have merged, things are changing all the time, and there's lots of uncertainty. And so, kind of knowing what you're going to hold on to, which is much more about you and your strengths and your values, the things that matter to you, and what it's okay to kind of let go of. So it might be about letting go of a certain title or position, or I thought I was going to get to work on this thing, and that feels like that's just not going to come to fruition anymore. I think that's just kind of quite useful to just figure out the difference between those two things. And then more practically, we know that one thing that's really effective around exploring your potential, where you might go, what you might do, particularly if it's different to what you'd imagined, is experimenting. And I'd love to see
Yes.
more experimenting when people think about their careers. Actually, that's one of the things that we've written about, a whole chapter about in Learn Like a Lobster, is learn as you go experiments. So this kind of attitude of, you only, experiments only fail sort of if you fail to learn. Experiments are designed for learning. Just the nature of experimenting means that you learn. And so you can, rather than sort of doing something dramatically different in your career, which actually very rarely happens with career change, that's not really how career change tends to happen, much more useful for you to think about, well, are there projects, are there initiatives, are there things across the industry, are there causes or campaigns that I'm really passionate about, are there things I could just start experimenting with? It might be volunteering, could be trustee roles, could be non-executive roles, whatever that kind of looks like. But you see them, rather than seeing them as, I need to tick them off the list, or they're an answer. Kind of, I think if you shift your perspective of, I'm just going to experiment. I'm going to experiment with doing some of these things to see kind of what I learn, to create some new connections, to see what possibilities it might open up. Then what I think is useful about that is you feel like you're taking action, because
Yes.
to experiment, you can't think your way through to experiments. You have to act your way into experimenting. So you're taking action, which is good because that gives you momentum and you feel like you're moving forward. You also feel like you're taking control, and none of us like to be out of control. So
Yes.
that's a good thing too. And often from those experiments often stack up together. They lead to more experiments. So you do one thing and that often leads to another and leads to another, but you sort of don't have to worry about that when you're just getting started. So I think if you're someone at the moment and you are at a bit of a career crossroads, the most common response I see to that is people feeling like there is a right answer, or there is going to be a moment where the clouds clear and you're going to have like an
Yep.
aha realization. I, in my experience, like personally, but also for all the people you work with, it's just sort of not really how it works. People tend to learn by doing. You learn by experimenting. Try and do more of what you enjoy. Those things that kind of give you energy, that help to stretch you. and find different places and different situations kind of where you can do that, and maybe just take kind of the pressure off yourself of feeling like I must have a career plan. I think kind of plans, titles, steps, destinations are all quite ladder like, and we just know
Yes.
both our careers are squiggly, but of course our work environments, they're just, that change and uncertainty just sort of isn't going anywhere. So I don't think we want to be fixed to a future. I think we want to be flexible about what our career might look like, while kind of staying true to the things that matter most to us.
No, I couldn't agree more. Now more than ever, and it's almost giving yourself permission to accept that there's more than one correct path forward, and suggesting that you explore or experiment with these different areas. So they would you encourage people on the areas that they look to experiment in, that they're sort of passion driven, but that people are aware of what's going to give them energy, and kind of follow your passion and experiment with areas that really have an emotional appeal?
I I'm always a bit nervous about the word passion,
Okay.
um, because I think we can get into that territory of, like do what you love, those kind of career cliches that were very fashionable about 5 or 10 years ago. And I'm not sure. I think we also have to be realistic about what work can give us, and work doesn't have to give us everything. Other
Yes,
parts of our life
true.
also give us a lot too. Um, so I don't usually use the word passions. I often will say to people, well, think about your strengths, because we have the most capacity to grow in the areas that we already have strengths in. That is how our brains work. And so if you want to increase your impact, you want to stretch your strengths. It's also how we find flow. So you get into that flow state of just kind of really being in and immersed within the work that you do, when your strengths are being kind of challenged in some ways. So you're not just using them, but you're stretching them. So I am a big advocate of kind of starting with your strengths and looking about how could you transfer your talents to other teams based on the strengths that you've got. So when I moved from marketing to corporate affairs, the only thing I had really was my behavioural strengths, because I had no technical capability at all. Other people did, luckily, but I definitely just sort of took my hows with me rather than my whats. My whats weren't particularly relevant,
Yeah.
and it was quite different. It was quite a different way of working, and a different set of skills people in that team had versus marketing. So I definitely had some strengths I was taking with me. What was brilliant about that move is, I think the reason I learned so much in there was also a lot of newness, a lot of things that I'd not done before. So it gave me the chance to be a beginner, which I think is really important in a squiggly career, because you will be a beginner more often. You
Yes.
will do things you've not done before. You'll need skills that you don't know you need today. And so it was sort of that perfect mix of my strengths were useful and utilized, and there was enough newness that I was kind of adding to my experiences, and like learning new skills from people who were kind of very good at them too. One of the other questions, somebody called Jack Graham, who actually he used to run a social enterprise called Year Here, and now works for Virgin. And Jack said on our podcast, nobody should sort of follow that advice of like, well, what do I love? He says everybody should ask themselves the question, how can I be most useful?
Mm,
And useful is one of our values at Amazing If. It's our sort of number one value at Amazing If. And so I think that is also a really good practical coach yourself question. And if I think about the jobs where you're most useful, they do tend to be the ones that you enjoy the most, because you can see, oh, it makes a difference. It makes a difference that I turn up to work every day. And then you get to a Friday and you think, was my time at work well spent? And typically, if you've been useful, like you feel like generally the answer to that is yes. And I think that can never be a bad thing.
a great answer. Um, what about mindset, Sarah? Because it's fundamental in terms of progression in any way, shape, or form. Have you got any general mindset tips, or are there any personal sort of rituals that you follow or practices that you do that may be beneficial to others?
Mindset definitely matters. And I think it's probably the biggest difference that we see with all the people that we work with. So we work with thousands of people all over the world. And sometimes people will ask me about age. Oh, so are people better or worse at learning at a certain age, or are attitudes more fixed, and
Yeah.
are people more, they don't want to let go of the legacy of the ladder if they're older, for example. And actually, in my experience, it's never age. It's always mindset. You can be 21, you can be 61, and you
Agree.
can either be really open or you can be really closed. And you can be either of those ages. Um, and I think the thing that helps the most is actually just being aware of where you might be getting in your own way, so that then you can at least start to do some reframes. I think reframing here is really helpful. So the things that can get in your way can be things that where you see yourself, or where you see other people, or even like other teams. It doesn't even have to be people, in quite a fixed way. Oh, they're never going to do that, or I'm not going to be able to do that. So it feels very full stop. Like I can't, they can't, and there's no sort of room. There's no room for manoeuvre. No curiosity, no openness to challenge. When I think people come with more of a learning mindset, it does always start with curiosity and that sort of willingness to be adaptable, to kind of be flexible, and to know that we do all share that neuroplasticity. So we can all keep learning and growing. None of us have to stay kind of where we are today. But to be really practical about it, because I think with mindset, it can sometimes just feel a bit vague. It's quite hard sometimes to make it concrete. I always think your confidence gremlins are a really good place to start. So everybody has confidence gremlins, which are just beliefs that hold them back. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, comparison, fear of failure, fear of being found out, imposter syndrome, the kind of classic one. I think once you start to know what they sound like for you, you can start to figure out how to keep them caged. So one of mine has always been conflict. And that sounds like, if my gremlin is talking, if people disagree with me, it means they don't like me. Or if people disagree with me, it's because they think I'm not good at my job. And I don't want either of those two things to be true. And the problem is with gremlins, when they are in charge of you, they influence your actions and your behaviours. So I don't disagree with you. I don't speak up in meetings. When you ask me about passions, I just agree, because I think, oh no,
Yep.
but if I say the answer that I did say, then Suzie might think I'm being difficult, or she might not want to get to know me after this conversation. And so I think, like, recognizing first what those gremlins sound like in your head, knowing that everybody's
But
got
we
them.
all have them.
Everybody, like I promise that is true. There was a brilliant statement where it said, like we should basically see these like the doubts, fears that we have about ourselves. They are features of being human, not something to be fixed. They are just like features of who we are, but they can hold us back. That's the problem in our squiggly careers, because they can stop you from doing things that would help you, to progress, that would help you to try new things. Your gremlins want you to do things you've done before and stick to your comfort zone. They definitely don't want you to transfer your talents, or to be a beginner, or to try things out, because they'll go, what if you fail? You know, like that annoying kind of voice in your head. And I think when you start to kind of figure out an alternative kind of story, then it can really kind of help you to just kind of keep the gremlins caged. So I always kind of say to myself, like, if people disagree with me, I'll be better because of it. And I'm really motivated by being better. You've got to be motivated by the second part of that statement. But
Yes.
achievement is my number one value. So I'm so motivated by achieving things. If I think, if people disagree with me, I'm going to achieve more, but I'm going to be better because of it. It's just a good rewiring of how I see disagreement and like hard conversations. And so I think once you've sort of shifted that mindset, you can then move to skill set. And the skill set is then the action. Like, you've got the awareness shift, but what's the action you're going to take? There's no point me saying, well, when people disagree with me, I'm better because of it, but then I still don't talk, or I don't ask a question, or I don't contribute.
Yeah.
And so if I then get surprised by disagreement, which is always the hardest situation for me, what I have found worked really well for me, and this is a small change that had a really significant impact actually on my career, was not feeling any pressure to win an argument, Like I've not got to debate somebody. All I've got to do is ask open, curious questions. And actually, asking open, curious questions is a great way to influence. It's a
Mhm.
great way to learn more from that other person. It's a skill that I've got. So I know I can do that. And
Yeah.
it just helps me to stay present enough to stay part of the conversation rather than what I would want to do. Like if I was just letting my gremlin roam free, ideally I'd leave. I'm just like, I don't even want to be in this
Yes.
conversation. I definitely stop listening. I'm definitely panicking. I'm getting hot. I'm usually getting sweaty. Like none of those things are kind of working for me. But sometimes in the past, I've worked for people who love a good challenge. They debate for fun, which I find hard to understand. But I'm like, but I need to be able to work with these people really well. And I've got to get past, I think I was making an assumption that sort of when people gave me a different point of view, I was like, different equals difficult. I was kind of and again, it's about you. I think I was labeling people as being difficult. Actually, all they were doing was just offering a different point of view. And so I think that's also a really good example of really taking ownership for yourself. Like my conflict gremlin is all about me. It's nothing to do with other people. It's all about me figuring out how to make sure that doesn't stop me from doing jobs where I do need to sometimes disagree with people, or where I need to stand up for what I believe in, or as a leader where I want to role model. I will support my team's point of view in a meeting, even if other people are disagreeing with me. If my team don't think I can do that, that's not a leader that you want to follow. But it's hard. Like working on your mindset and your skill set is not easy. But I think when you start to kind of break it down, hopefully with that, like the way that I've just talked about it, it starts to make it practical and it makes it easier. And then I think with a bit of practice, you then sort of learn that new behavior. I have just learned to get better at hard conversations. Do I still find them hard? Yes. But are they so much easier than they were? Also, yes.
It is really practical advice and it does take effort, but it's so
Mm-hmm.
worthwhile and people will see the results quite quickly as well, as they kind of put the investment into it. Before we finish, Sarah, would you share with us where people listening can find the wealth of content, and when the new and a date, if you've got one, for when the new book launches?
Yeah, of course. So our website is amazingif.com. And there's a section called free, like free tools. So you can go to all the free things. There's also a section for the podcast. But to be honest, wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, you'll find it. They're 500 plus episodes actually sounds like a good thing, but it can feel a bit overwhelming for people. So I would encourage you to not start from the start, either just start from where we are or search topics based on what you need in your career right now. So search networking, search how to ask for a pay rise. And you'll find the kind of podcast that you need in that moment. If you ever can't find one, please email me because I'm always looking for new ideas for
Yeah,
podcasts now that we're 500 episodes in. And you can connect with me and with Helen on LinkedIn, and you can follow Amazing If on LinkedIn too. And we have a newsletter on Tuesdays called Squiggly Careers in Action, and that is where we summarise everything free we have on careers and learning for that week, kind of all in one place. And when you go to the website, it'll prompt you to sign
so you
up for
can
that.
sign up for that
Yeah,
on the
if that would
website.
be interesting. Yeah.
Excellent. And a date yet for the new book
Oh,
coming
yes,
out?
we do. 5th of February. So the book comes out 5th of February. But if you pre-order it now, and then you email us at hello@lobsterlibrary.com, we will send you 3 free workshops. So you can do some learning straight away and lots of 10-minute tools, because I always think with pre-orders, we want people to pre-order because it's really helpful for us, but we also want there to be an immediate payoff for you and your learning. So if you do pre-order the book, please make sure you send us that, just a confirmation of your pre-order, because then you will get lots of learning for free sent to you straight away.
Fantastic. And pre-order off a specific channel?
Wherever you want to buy your books.
Excellent. Fantastic. So pre-order and then email through and you'll get
Yes.
access to those free sessions. Sarah, thank you. I wish you and Helen every success with Learn Like a Lobster. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very, very much for your time today and your brilliant answers.
Thanks so much, Suzie. Lovely to talk to you.
Pleasure.